Welcome to a brand new episode of our podcast, American Spaces on Air, an initiative brought to you by the American Space at Instituto Chileno Norteamericano in Santiago, the American Academy of Science and Technology at Universidad de Talca, and the support of the United States Embassy in Santiago and the American Spaces Network in Chile. I am Nicole Belay, the coordinator of the American Academy of Science and Technology at Universidad de Talca, and I want to thank you for joining us today.
Hi, I'm Mario Clemente, Outreach Director at Instituto Chileno Norteamericano in Santiago, and I'm very happy to welcome two very special guests today. Casey Anderson, an American wildlife naturalist, filmmaker, and television presenter, and René Araneda, a Chilean wildlife documentarian, producer, and director. They are good friends and have worked together on the documental Into the Puma Triangle, where they captured the wild pumas or mountain lions of Torres del Paine National Park in the Chilean Patagonia in 2020. With my colleague Nicole, we are very happy to have you both here. So, René and Casey, welcome to American Spaces on Air.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure, man. And so good to see Casey also. I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, so, wow. You look the same. You look good.
Well, I have a little girl now, so I haven't been sleeping much, but I'm happy.
Very good. Okay, so the first question that we have for you, it's for both of you. So how did your interest in wildlife and nature documentaries begin? How did you meet each other? Casey, would you like to start?
Sure, yeah. I was born and raised in Montana, which is a state in the United States that's, quite mountainous, quite wild. So I spent, since I can remember, since I was walking around, exploring the natural world. That's all I've ever done. And that's all I'm good at. That just metamorphosized and changed into who I am now. I mean, I always wanted to work with animals and didn't realize that I could do it as a profession. Even when I was a kid, a little bit I learned, I apply a lot of that stuff now. And I think the main thing is that always keeping curious. But that got me into wildlife filmmaking. And wildlife filmmaking got me going to wildlife film festivals and meeting like-minded people. And little did I know that whole time I had a brother from another mother on the other side of the planet, basically doing the same thing. And I crossed paths with him at a festival, and we hit it off and been good friends and working colleagues ever since. And that's that Chilean guy right next to me on the screen, René.
Well, it's 8 years, right? Since we met, I think about 8 years. No. I used to watch Casey's documentaries and films in Nat Geo. Casey was. I've always, like, when people ask me this, I always say that there's really good references out there in TV that work with wildlife, and there's also like not that great. In general, when you work with animals, you have to remember that this is TV. And when you work with animals, if you don't know where the limits are, that could get really bad. And there's a lot of bad things out there. And I think Casey was always a reference. So I knew Casey from way before. And I remember, well, right now, actually, at this time of year, there's a festival next week. I'm going to see Casey in a week almost in the US, in Wyoming, Jackson. And I remember going on the delegate list that year, I think 2014 or 15, maybe. And I see this famous presenter of Nat Geo in there with his picture and his email. And I just sent him an email like, hey, dude, let's talk about pumas, right? That's how it started. And that's how we started talking in festivals about pumas. We work with pumas here. And our pumas, even though it's the same species, we can talk about subspecies, right? But it's the same animal, but it's not the same. It's a very different animal in terms of its behavior, in the ways that the animals behave with people around. And Casey's, even though Casey's very famous because of bears and wolves, he says, I'm not sure, you need to confirm this, Casey, but he says that one of his favorite animals is the puma. And your puma sightings were crossing the road and from far away, and you were working on this film of a puma in your backyard, And then I told you, like, come to Chile, and that's how it started. It changed your opinion of pumas, right?
Oh yeah. No, Renee's right. I mean, it was seeing a puma in the United States is very difficult. I've spent my entire life, and probably into my 30s, maybe seeing a dozen pumas in very fleeting, quick sightings. And then, like you said, I was working on this documentary, and I was spending countless hours just looking for pumas. I had some luck, but yeah. And this animal has always haunted me. It's haunted me because around here, they don't want to be understood. They have a fear of humans. They compete with a lot of other predators like bears and wolves and other things. So they're a little different than the pumas, like he's saying, the way that they behave. So when we started talking about our common love of pumas, and yes, mountain lions are my favorite animal, and they always have been. What the picture that he painted sounded like paradise, like a heavenly place to me. And so when he was gracious enough to invite me to Chile, I was like, I gotta go. And next thing you know, I'm on an airplane headed south.
And how was your experience coming to Chile?
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, mind blowing. As Renee was just mimicking there. It was yeah, the one thing about Chile from top to bottom, the diversity of landscapes. It's what I can gush about Chile all day long because when it comes to the wild countries on the planet that have such diverse landscapes, wildlife, and then I always say the icing on the cake is the wonderful and beautiful people. Yeah, it was. I fell in love with it immediately. I felt like it was a second home, and it really, little did I know it was going to start to turn into a second home as we, after my first trip, spending several years there with Renee in Patagonia, and then up and down the coast doing another documentary. Yeah, I love it. I think it's one of the best countries on the planet, and I look forward to getting back there as soon as possible.
Perfect.
The cool thing, Mario, Nicole, the cool thing is that we started with pumas, but obviously we did a film, and the post-production of that, we did it in Montana. So I spent 6 months, maybe I was there, like moving in and out, going to the UK for other stuff when we were working on the National Park series. But I was like hanging out with all of Casey's, not only friends, but also his family. So the same with Casey here. Like, I think we've built a really cool connection, so many things in common. And that's how eventually we do business together, because we have ideas, we propose them. But at the end of the day, it's not only the business, it's because we want to do stuff that is fun, that is cool. And people don't know this, but with Casey, we were sailing in Patagonia in the fjords, filming whales and dolphins and just having fun, right? It's really cool when you can work on something that you love, but at the same time, when you work with people that you also love and you care for, and it's just like, it's the perfect formula.
Absolutely. Yeah. And was this time in Montana your first time in the United States, or you've been there before?
I went there to Disney when I was like 9 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, but over time, for Jackson, for that festival, I've been there in the US many times, different places, holidays, family, but it's different. I think what I found in Montana specifically, it's very similar to what I had here in the Patagonia. I don't know, it's like a sort of a format of people in there, very outdoor, mountains, the weather. I love cold, and I love the rain, and I love the snow and forest, and it's just people that, yes, we go out for beers, but then next morning you're hiking super early, and with Case, there's nothing better also than finding people that you have things in common. And I remember Casey taking me to Yellowstone, even if it's for a day, like he lives pretty close to Yellowstone entrance. So it's
Nice.
like leaving super early, I don't know, like 4 a.m. I think we had some food from your wife, from Steph, that he had for us, you remember?
Yeah.
And then we just, that's what friends do. It's like people that like to go fishing, it's the same. We just go there with the binos and hanging out, and that's how you get like a much deeper connection. It's, of course, been to New York and other like big cities, and it's fun, but it's not the same. I'd rather be in a place like this, and I could spend months or years in there. it's awesome.
Yes, it's very nice that you can share that with us, because usually the guests that we have are not that in touch with nature. They study in universities and they do science and things like that, so they are not really close to nature the way you are. So that's also another aspect that's very important to highlight.
Yeah. And talking about this passion, René, that links your personal and professional life, right? This question goes for you. What kind of message or impact do you hope to achieve with your documentaries, and what drives you to explore and document Chile's biodiversity in your projects?
I think that the first thing is because personally, and probably we know each other a lot already. I know that Casey is going to say something similar because we want to be there. We want to see these animals. If I've never seen a puma before, I want to see that puma. Like Casey came here, he wanted to see the pumas here, right? If I want to see a tiger, I've never seen a tiger. I want to go and see that animal, right? That's your gut feeling. That's what you want. It's something that you've been dreaming since you were a kid. That's what I've been dreaming since I was a kid. I always wanted to go to Africa and see the African wildlife. But then there's a second thing that is not the gut feeling, that it's a little bit of more of maybe it's a little bit of an adult point of view, right? That is all what we know, because we also work with conservation, biologies, science. What we know is that we are against time. What we know is that there's a lot that we can do, that we can say, and that we can show to the world to make a better place, not only for us, but also for the wildlife and for nature. And both things are connected. So yeah, it's a gut feeling first, but then it's what can we do that gives something positive to it. What we do in natural history, there's many formats. You can have Casey as a presenter, super successful, being the nicest guy in camera, very honest. That's what I wanted to say also before, that he was a reference because he's a real nature guy, right? Like he's not someone that has a script behind and he knows the stuff and he's very good at it because he's not acting, he's honest on it. That's a format. But then you have the other kind of format that we've also worked a lot on, that is basically filming animals, their natural behavior. What you find in common with all of these formats is that what you're doing, you're engaging your audience, you're making people to fall in love with animals that maybe they are right outside of your window, the little bird right there, or an animal that lives in another continent. You're showing that secret life of some of these animals, and you're making people to fall in love, and basically that means protection, and that means generating awareness, and that means teaching, and that means, many people don't have the privilege or the luck, or they're lucky enough to live close to Yellowstone like Casey or me, that I can go to Torres del Paine. But, they should know what you can feel when you see these animals make.
That's really good. That's what you achieve, actually.
Hopefully.
Good to hear.
Very good. Casey, and in your case, you've been recognized for your ability to bridge human connections with the natural world and the wild animals. What inspired you to pursue this unique approach in your work?
Yeah, I think a lot of what René just said resonates into the answer a bit. I think that, we are lucky that we get to experience nature. And then when we bring those, I think the birth of this passion to share happened naturally. It was, going out into the mountains with my father and having wonderful experiences, and then coming back to school and telling my friends about the stories that happened with my dad, right? And watching their eyes get big and the excitement and their yearning to learn more, their curiosity becoming greater. And that metamorphosized into, what we do now. I mean, we're doing that. I'm still telling the same stories I was telling when I was a kid to my schoolmates, except for now it's on a big platform and it's to the rest of the world. As we go out and have these experiences, and we get to experience these secret stories and see these things other people can't. And then when you go and you tell these stories and you see the excitement and that yearning to learn more ignite in the faces of the people. That's it. I think that's what we're trying to do. So I think, I don't know if I answered that question completely, but I think that, we're still doing the same things we were doing when we were kids, telling stories. And I think that we're always looking for new, interesting stories, different ways to tell stories, different ways to tell stories to people that may not really care about wildlife. You were saying the guests that you have on here they're students, they're not connected to wildlife. Well, it's our responsibility to connect them and give them a chance to hear and see what we get to hear and see.
Absolutely. Yeah, when I was talking about our usual guests, the ones that have been closer to nature, they usually start from a place where they want to understand animals, right?
Yeah.
We have had a couple of marine biologists, and they want to understand animals. And I think you take it a step beyond when you try to explain animals and their situation to other people. So that's absolutely something very, very important.
Yeah, I think if people don't understand, then a lot of time that lack of knowledge will turn into fear. You fear with the unknown, right? And then why would you want to protect and take care of something that you're afraid of, right? So through knowledge and through what we can share, hopefully we can change that fear into respect, and then with that respect, they'll make the right decisions to protect these wild places and animals that live with them.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Casey. Well, for our audience, we want you to know that during September, we celebrate the National Wilderness Month. So as American Spaces, it's important to increase the awareness of this kind of topics. So for both of you, how do you address conservation and environmental protection in your documentary projects? You have already talked about it a little bit, but we would like to go deep.
You want that one, René?
I think that's kind of part of it, how we pick up the stories, how we present the formats. I have to say that depends what TV station, channel, commissioner you're working with, because also depends. I've had experiences with big international TV stations that have been not fighting, I don't know that the word, but discussing and trying to get away with it, of talking about an animal that maybe is not that interesting to them, but it's interesting from the point of view of conservation, like a deer. A deer is not that attractive for a film, right? Because how many deers do you see every day, Casey, at your backyard? It's a pretty common animal. Depends. There's several species, but for the audience, a deer obviously is not as attractive as a shark or a big cat, right? But depends on the TV station. Depends on the commissioner and the format. But from the point of view of us finding stories, putting them together and putting them out there, there's always conservation issues that we want to talk about. There's always a positive message that we want to leave there, or expose things as well. That our main intentions are those. Then we need to always negotiate and see how many of them we can actually, be successful in talking about them. But it's something that is always there. I think it's almost mandatory at this point when we produce stuff, right, Casey? It's like there's always that kind of conservation, protection, educational angle. So the complex thing is because we need to do it in an entertaining way, and we need to do it in it's everyone has a control right now, and you can change TV like this in 2 seconds, and so you need to be very competitive. If you're putting something in there, it has to be something that attracts your audience, and that's a challenge, because it doesn't work if it's just a lecture. You need to make it fun, but making it fun or entertaining doesn't mean that you can talk to a deeper level about problematics. So yeah, it's important. It's crucial.
I just want to add to that. I think sometimes we do have to be careful, because they want entertainment, and those are the platforms we need to be on so we can get the eyeballs and the people, right? So sometimes we have to the conservation has to be subtle within the story. But people are smart. If you can tell a story where they can connect and relate to an animal or a place, they can find themselves or their family within the story that they're hearing, they will start to care. And then, that call to action, they'll pick up their phone and they'll they're going to Google, how do I save pumas, right? So I think the impact sometimes is subtle. I think the audiences are smart. It's just our job to to win their heart. And if we can win their heart, we usually can win their mind, and then that mind will turn into action, and action will turn into results.
Great. So through the motion, make this balance, between like the storytelling and the facts, the education component. Thank you both.
And the storytelling, sorry, is to add something else. It's just storytelling too, right? It's a good example that we're using the Pumas as example all the time. It's just like everyone has seen anything like something from Pumas recently, and why a lot of the films they choose your main character is a mother with cubs is because you will understand, no matter if you don't know anything about wildlife and if you don't know anything about those Pumas, you will understand why that mother, has that strong connection with those cubs, those kittens, why she struggles day to day to be able to feed them and hunt something. And then you're not seeing that Puma as a killer machine anymore. You're just seeing a mom that wants to feed the cubs for a daily survival thing. It's and you empathize. And that's also, no matter if there's no humans in there, as Casey or myself or both of us sometimes on screen being emotional about it, but it's already emotional just by the story of this animal trying to survive. And that's something that you're going to see, I would say, in most sequences of the most classic natural history. You will understand the animal, no matter how complex it is. And if it's an insect or if it's a bird, it's a male fighting for, against another male. It's a mother trying to survive, or so you will understand in the most basic and easy way. Storytelling.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And speaking of storytelling, and festivals, in March of this year, the third version of the festival Santiago Wild was launched, organized by Ladera Sur and the collaboration of the National Geographic and Jackson Wild, where you, René, participated as a jury member and Casey as a director with your film Growing Up Grizzly. Please tell us more about the importance and scale of events like this. This question goes for whoever wants to answer.
Casey first.
Yeah, I love that this film festival is in Santiago. And I think the main reason why is it'll go back to the very first question you asked me. Chile itself, I mean, it's one of the most natural treasures on earth. And it's when everybody who lives in Santiago, right out their back door is some of the most wild, wonderful places on the planet. And I think that, Chile seems so far away from the world sometimes, right? And it seems like it's, it is. It's on the edge of the earth. And I think when the local people have the opportunity to share in the natural spectacles of the world and realize that they're one of the richest countries on the planet when it comes to the things that matter in the natural world, and they compare themselves to other things. Through this film festival, I feel like it's a point of something to be very proud of. I think it's a way. A lot of the films that are in the film festival are made by Chileans in Chile or in the region, and it's something that there's some of the best filmmakers on the planet come from right in your home in Chile. So I think it's a celebration worth having. It's a celebration that people come across the world to come and be part of. And it's not necessarily, it's a celebration of the wild world, but it's also a celebration of Chile, its natural resources, and the people who are responsible to take care of it and call it home.
I also think that Ladera Sur, everything happened very kind of natural, in a natural way too, because you have Jackson Wild, there's two like the most important festivals in the world. One of them is Jackson, the other one is in the UK, and they used to have 1 year each, right? And Ladera Sur basically got in touch with Jackson just to try to replicate in a South American scale the Jackson Festival, and Jackson supported that because Jackson also has been supporting for many years now, not only the main industry, because when we go to Jackson, like next week, we're going to be with Casey. yeah, it's all of the main actors of this natural history industry are there, but mostly I would say 80% of them is from either the UK or the US. Probably like 60% is from the UK, 30% from the US, and the rest of the world is in the other 20, right? So it's an industry that is mostly in northern hemisphere. There's so when Jackson supports this festival here, what they're doing, they are motivating people, no matter how expensive, cheap, good or bad your production is. They're saying go out there, film things, tell us a story, because those stories, and this comes back to the same thing we were talking before, those stories, someone needs to tell them, because you can be talking about a problem of a very specific little lizard that lives in a valley, and that maybe is not going to be the story that's going to go out there in the big Netflix productions unless someone puts this out there and explains and finds something. So I think it's a huge encouraging thing for many. And unlucky, we're very unlucky, because Casey was coming to the first festival version, and we were hit by COVID. You remember that was 2020. Casey was. We were going to present the Puma Triangle film, or the Legends of the Ice Mountains. I think we've done a lot of films together. I can't remember now, but he was going to be here, and we were going to have fun with our friends. But yeah, COVID didn't make it possible. But I think it's a really good opportunity for many, and also to be associated with the main Jackson Wild, which is a win-win situation.
Yeah, and that's why international cooperation is that important. And we know that you already participated in the first version of Festival Santiago Wild in 2020, with into the Puma Triangle world premiere, right? So please tell us more about this beautiful and amazing documental carried out in southern Chile, and what did you discover there about pumas?
Wow, we discovered a lot about pumas and a lot of different things. That first trip that I went down to Chile, that's where this was born. It was born from that trip, and a lot of the documentary was filmed, and it was within a week, right?
Yeah.
It just shows, I don't necessarily believe in luck, but there was a fair amount of it. There's the old saying that luck is the combination of hard work and being in the right place at the right time. But we, I think that, that was a big part of the intrigue, was that René was telling me how he was seeing pumas socially interacting. And this was something in science that there was some whispers about it here and there. But most people will look at that species and say this is a solitary animal. Doesn't spend much time with each other. And he was seeing some very complex social interaction. So, and even at that point, he was seeing it here and there. It wasn't like he was seeing it every day. So we were taking a chance that we were going to go down there and see some of this. And little did we know that we were going to see it on a grand scale. And on a grand scale, sense has been seen multiple times. But then it was one of the first times it was, I think it had been documented a little bit prior, but not much. But we saw significant social interaction. And I think at one point we saw 9 pumas.
The film says 8. The only reason why the film says 8 is because the 9th puma, we couldn't put it on the same shot. So it was like cheating, right? So technically we had 9, but the film says 8. So it's even better. But usually films, they do the opposite, right? They would have said 10, but we said 8.
Yeah. So, and I remember in the moment, we're, as the film goes, it's me going to Chile, learning about Chile and Patagonia, getting to know René better, and then, friends exploring, and that's what it is. And if you watch the film, you'll see a lot of just two friends exploring together, but finding significant things, and for me, it was a new discovery around every corner. What René's experience with pumas was not mine. So, he'd say, yeah, that puma's not going to run away. And I'm like, what, really? It's not going to be afraid of me. And the next thing I know, the puma's walking within 2 meters of me. Right. And was shocking. So I was like a little kid at at Disneyland like René was when he was 9. But this was my Disneyland in Patagonia, because it was like, epic mountains and glaciers and avalanches and mountain lions and everywhere, and hanging out with a good friend. And it was like, yeah. So if you watch the film, one thing you're going to see throughout the entire thing is this mist right here.
It's all real. It's all real. And the thing is that this wasn't supposed to. So basically, Casey came here to Chile. We had this team together. We've been working there for years. Casey, come to Chile, come and check it out. Maybe we could do a film at some point, right? Casey comes to Chile, and like literally day one, like a female and a male, almost mating right in front of us.
Wow.
5 meters away. And Casey at that point is like, what's going on here? Second day, like, you want to approach that cat? Let's try it. Everything with a permit. Like, I have to say, when Casey says 2 meters away, the cats, they just go, if they're walking, they're just going to go there because there's someone behind you. They don't care about you. Obviously, we are out of the trail. We have a special permit. It's not that anyone can go and just play around with. It's a predator, right? So we're not playing around or fooling around. But then we see, I don't know how many interactions between different animals, and basically what we saw in a week is not your normal average of sightings. So as Casey says, there was a bigger energy, something going on that basically says, guys, I'm going to give you this. You make the best out of that. And we had cameras, and we were not thinking about filming the 70% of our film in that week. Usually that doesn't happen. If you put it into a paper, that would have been impossible. But things were happening there. So when you see the film, everything is real. Nothing is scripted. Everything we're talking on location. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of things that we can't really use on it because we're just between us, like, joking and talking about anything really. And it became a film because it was so amazing what we saw. So then obviously we need to put together do some interviews just to connective tissue kind of things. But I think it's one of the most straightforward things that we've ever done. Because the industry, not our fault or anyone's fault, it's just the way it is. The film came like 3 years after everything happened. I think Casey didn't have any kid when this was filmed. And then when the film came out, you had 2 already, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The timings are like that. Sometimes it takes a while to film, to sign an agreement, to find your channel, put it together, and then you deliver that. And maybe 6 months later, that's going to be shown. So it was a very natural and organic thing that happened. But what happened there was that we got that film with presenters, because Casey and myself, we were like on screen. But then we generated, because of that, another big project, which was for Nat Geo, Terramater, PBS. And we have a version with Jeremy Irons being the voiceover, and the other version with Uma Thurman. So it's pretty big. And that's pure natural history, Blue Chip, which is the story of these pumas. We followed them for, 4 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning when Casey went there for the first time. And then we have all of this. I don't know how many times you've been here, Casey. 6.
Yeah, but I think it's amazing to say it was all born at a film festival. You and me, a common love for an animal, and we just did it. And then we've done several. We made that amazing film, and then we've made several after, and it snowballed. And who knows what's going to come next? We got another film festival ahead, and I'm sure we got many projects ahead too.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you. You were very lucky. Yeah.
Okay, so
Mario.
René, you shared a bunch of amazing stories from that time where you were filming this documentary about the pumas. But we were wondering if you what is your most memorable experience that you've had while filming in Chile?
I already told you that before we were recording this, which is Casey's discovered. Like, you can tell them, Casey, what you discovered about the feeding habits of the pumas.
Which one?
The feeding behavior, the chips.
Oh yeah, no, So Yeah, probably the most amazing thing is that we figured out what pumas dip their chips in.
Oh, that's amazing. First of all, the fact that they dip chips, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
You know
But what is it? What is it that they use to dip their chips in?
Pumas love to dip their chips in guacamole.
Guacamole.
I don't know. Like I've heard these jokes in 3 continents for like 8 years now.
I don't know where you're going with that, Renee. I'm gonna hijack your answer here because I do public speaking things fairly regularly, and in the Q&As, one of the main questions is, what is the most amazing thing that you've seen in the wild? And I've been all over the world and I've seen a lot of amazing things. But the most amazing thing I've ever seen was with Renee. It wasn't captured on film. It's a story I love to tell, so I'm going to tell it.
The moon.
Please do.
Yeah.
The moon?
Yeah.
So I was going to say I agree with that.
Yeah, it is one of the most amazing. So we were following this female who had 2 kittens, and we knew where she had bedded down for the day, and we knew that there was a good chance she was going to get up from her day's sleep and hunt that evening. So Renee and I were in the camera truck. Renee was driving, I was operating the camera, and she fortunately was bedded down near the side of the road. So we pulled into position, kind of were waiting for them to wake up. And soon Mom wakes up and the kittens wake up, and Mom kind of goes out to a view shed to kind of scan her night hunt ahead. She's going to look around and see what's going on. And one of the kittens kind of follows Mom, but the other one stays behind. And so Renee and I were watching this kitten who stayed behind, and it's looking frozen like a statue into the sky. And it's not moving for a long time. Very strange behavior. So immediately, Renee and I have been, a lot of times cats, like in Africa, they'll see vultures or something and they'll watch the birds or whatever. We look out the window like this and like, we don't, what's it looking at? Is it looking at, is it looking at birds? And we look out, we don't see anything. So this carries on for several minutes. This cat is just locked in looking at the sky. So to the point that we're just like, something's wrong with this cat, or there's something up there. So we get out of the vehicle. And as soon as we get out of the vehicles, it reveals itself. Here it is in the sky, the full moon. And it struck us so deeply because here it is, a child of the earth, just like we all were, fixated on this beautiful moon, the full moon, just like my little girls now downstairs. My little boy, when the full moon pops up, they run to the window and they're yelling, moon, 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 moon. Well, guess what? Little baby pumas do the same thing. And when you can make a connection like that and experience something like that, it changes your view of the world. It changes the view of everything out there. And so, yeah, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in the wild. And it was with my buddy right there, Renee, in Patagonia in Chile.
Cristobal was with us, remember? Too, like with this back, yeah, was his good friend works with us, and this was, I think, the first day that he's been out with us there, the first time ever, the first shoot, and we were all shocked because Casey is not exaggerating. Like, this is what we felt on location because we were there already like for a month and a half, one of the toughest winters I think I've ever been there. We were with, I don't know, -10, -20 degrees. There was no water at camp sometimes because it was frozen. And also we hadn't seen that puma in a week. We lost that female, remember? And we're following day by day. So we didn't know what's going on. And so there was a lot of elements in there that made it even more emotional. But the whole point is, what is this cat doing watching or looking to the moon and straight there, like hypnotized by the light of it? And like, what is he thinking? Like in a guanaco, in mom, in his sibling? I don't know. Like, there's so much more. There's so many different layers that we can't really comprehend. And I think it's a beautiful mystery that we will never know the answer really, but we can dream about some answers to that. And it's something that you can't put a camera trap and figure that out, or you can't do any research paper about it, and you can study for years and you'll never know. It's just like, I think this is the romanticism of what we do. There's a lot of things that we will never get answers to, but we can always find a very beautiful storytelling, at least thing that makes sense to us. I think that's what we do, right? It's funny that you mentioned that, because it's also like something that you brought it back. I had it there, but yeah, I agree 100%. That was so cool.
So cool.
Great, that's awesome and beautiful, a beautiful experience. Thank you for sharing, and I think it's about what we share, like living beings. I mean, that's it. And uh, Casey, how do you balance the need of entertainment value in your presentations with the responsibility of accurately portraying the natural world and its inhabitants, like this framework?
Yeah, it's, we call it, there's a term that we use called, it's a hybridization of two words, edutainment, right? And I think that's what we're always trying to achieve. To keep people interested, we have to entertain. To keep the platforms, we have to entertain. But we also have the responsibility of always telling the truth and the facts. I think it becomes very instinctual for us and natural, organic, the way we do it. And I think that's, for example, if we look at Puma Triangle, René and I, we're nerds too. We like to read nerdy books, and we exchange books about birds and listen to bird calls. And we're scientists. We're always learning, right? We like to know the facts. We like to know the scientific names of all the animals. René knows way more than I do about that stuff. But it's our passion, right? And so when we're out there experiencing these things, I don't care if someone's passionate about chips and dip, and they're doing a documentary and they're passionate about chips and dip. They're attracted to watching people be passionate about anything, right? That's the entertainment value. So, like with Puma Triangle, we're having fun out there. And I think that it's infectious. The people were along with us, and they were laughing with us, and they're feeling like they were with friends. There's the entertainment. But they happen to be with friends who actually know a lot about the wild and know a lot of facts. So now you've got the hook, that entertainment hook, and then it's our responsibility to teach them the truth. So I think that's the balance. I mean, I think that it's always looking for a way, and I think if you can tell a story from a passionate place, people will watch it, and then you just gotta make sure to fact check and make sure everything that you're saying is true. And I think maybe more importantly too, again, it's like, how can you subtly give that call to action? Give people a way to do something once they get it, passionate themselves about it and learn these things. What can they do with those two things? And to give them that call to action in some way to make a difference.
There is something else also that it's I think at these standards or level in the industry, people that we work around, it's kind of the base you can build on top of that, but it's the ethics when working with animals also. Because one thing is what we're talking about, the format, entertaining, and what you educate, but also is how you behave, especially when you are a presenter on camera, how you behave with wildlife around you. So, ages ago, when the first films of presenters and animals, there was people would grab the snake and just like play with it around. Is there any need for that? Like, what you want to do, you can grab it if there's a proper justification for it. But are you gonna look yourself like, oh yes, I'm risking it. I'm risking everything and putting my life here, and because I wanna go and bother that mama bear with cubs. Those things, you never do them on screen. Like, the message that you put out there is not only the format, how entertaining it is, but also controlling the messages, the other kind of messages. And I think that's what I've told Casey this several times. So it's not something that I'm saying now in front of everyone, but that's what I like of Casey as a presenter, because what you see of Casey on screen is the same Casey out of screen, but also he's someone that knows about wildlife. Like, there's nothing, I'm a guide as well. My formation of a guide, I went to South Africa and I work with wildlife in there. You find animals, you observe animals, and you go away without disturbing. That's what we do when we film animals. It's exactly the same thing, but we need to talk a little bit more in front of a camera and explain what's going on, right? And be funny sometimes. But it's the respect that you have for wildlife and that's a message. I think that's an extra layer of message in terms of the ethics. And even if there's no people on screen, everyone in this industry has to act ethically, and that means, you don't force animals to do things. You don't create fake scenarios. There's things sometimes that you have to do because it's impossible if you don't do them like that. For example, filming nocturnal animals, smaller animals that you need to actually build a stage, but you work with in the most ethic way, and that means working with biology specialists, especially with again, smaller insects and things like that. So yeah, I think there's that makes our job harder sometimes, because that's why we go for a month or two, because we don't force things. There's many days that we don't get anything, and you need to be very patient, and you don't want to bother, you don't want to interrupt whatever the animal is doing. You want to feel natural behavior, and we can tell when an animal is stressed. Like, it's funny. If you go to Instagram to see pumas again, 90% of those pictures is a puma watching the camera. That is not useful for us. We have shots of the faces in certain moments, but it's not useful. We want to see the puma doing whatever it would be doing if we were there or not, and that happens with any animal.
Can I add real quick? René should give himself some credit here too. I think that element of thinking outside the box, does that idiom translate well? I mean, I always forget. I always use these things, but thinking outside the box. René had a series on Animal Planet before I met him called Wild Expectations, and it's a wildlife documentary like none that I've ever seen before. And I've heard this thing recently, and I thought it was really true. A lot of wildlife production companies are cover bands. They're always making documentaries that are like everybody else's documentaries. In fact, they'll mimic. I mean, it's this no risk thing. And René made a film that is not a cover band. It was an original. And in fact, if you watch this series, there's actually elements of it that remind me of a music video. I mean, it's, René scored the whole thing. They made it fun and interesting. But all of the entire time, they remain ethical, and everything is factual. But some of the delivery was completely out of the norm. And I think that as we move forward into the future, you can make films like Planet Earth, right? And a lot of people will watch it because it's stunning. But there's a lot of people that won't watch it. And those are the people that are maybe the most important to recruit. We gotta think of ways that those who don't already watch wildlife films are going to want to watch it. And I think like when René did with Wild Expectations, is that he did that. I mean, he made it. It's edgy. It's something a young genre people might want to watch. And I think we always got to think about that. I mean, we got to bring some of the tricks of Hollywood to the trade without losing the ethical aspects of it, so we can bring people in who don't already care.
Thank you, Casey.
You're welcome.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Guys, now changing the subject a little bit, Casey, we would like you to tell us a little bit more about Brutus, the grizzly bear that you raised since it was newborn, and how this relationship touched you, especially for those who may not know about this incredible bond that you built with this animal.
Yeah, so that's gosh, I was trying to figure out how long ago that was. So Brutus died a couple of years ago. And he was 19 when he died. 21 years ago. I was 26 years old, and I had the opportunity to rescue a grizzly bear that was born in captivity, and it was going to be euthanized. I was young. I was already making films. I was already, being a wildlife guy, and this opportunity came along, and I thought, why not? Let's raise a grizzly bear, right? And I look back on that now. I was 26. I see they're 26-year-old and they're so young. So there's no manual out there that's how to raise a grizzly bear. So I learned by doing it. And I think the one most important thing, and I'll try to, it's hard to summarize 20 years, right? But what I would say the most important thing is that through my connection to him from when he was a little tiny cub, and I would bottle feed him to as he grew up and would You know, we'd wrestle till we couldn't wrestle anymore, until he got too big. I got to see an animal deeper than I had ever had the opportunity to before. And not just any animal, an animal that's notorious for being, maybe even killing people sometimes, being a massive predator on the landscape. But what I saw within this animal was emotion and intelligence, right? At a level that you can only see if you spend every day with them. And, you know, while I'm out in the wild filming wild grizzly bears, you know, I'm watching from afar. I learned so much there, but then I would come home to a grizzly bear and I would learn so much more deeper. And sometimes I would learn that's what I would learn deeply with him, and I'd go back out and apply it and see it in the wild because I knew what I was looking for. And I think that the emotion and the connection and the love that I had with that bear and he had for me, you know, I thought, well, Brutus can feel that way. If Brutus can think that way, then why not that bear I just filmed last week out in the wild, right? And so when you start thinking about animals that way, you don't think about grizzly bears as a whole. You think about them as individuals, right? Brutus, I mean, I've worked with other grizzly bears and very similar to Brutus, but they don't have the same personality, you know. And I like to, like, this is one of the lessons I use a lot. And I say this a lot, but it's the best way to describe it is, it's a word I made up, canine morphism. You know, we've heard of anthropomorphism, but I like to say canine morphism because a dog is something that we can all relate to, right? We've all had dogs, or we all had friends that have dogs or family members. And, you know, there's some dogs that are smarter than other dogs. There's some dogs that are more playful than other dogs. There's some dogs that are lazy, right? Well, all animals have those same characteristics. You know, we can give them the dogs. You know, you can say, oh, Spot, he was the greatest dog I ever had. He was the smartest and the kindest. He loved everybody. And that dog that lived across the road would bite every kid that would go by, right? We know that about dogs, but you know what? It's the same with every animal out there. They're all individuals. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I learned from him. So now when you go out in the wild world, you don't look at it as like it's a population of grizzly bears. It's a population of pumas down in Patagonia. No, this is a tapestry of these individual personalities that are all different in their emotion. They're all products of what they've experienced through life. And they're all making decisions based on that. And, you know, so we got to know lots of pumas individually that were very different from each other. And then when you start looking at them that way, then they become more relatable, right? We can all find ourselves within them because we all are very different. You know, some of us are smarter than others, René and me. Some of us are funnier than others, René and me. I mean, you know, some of us are better looking than others, René and me. I mean, you can see the differences here. And that happens out in the wild. I mean, and I think that's the greatest gift that I got from my relationship with this gigantic bear who was graceful and patient enough to have this awkward human live next to him. And he showed me one of the most beautiful things that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life and hopefully teach my children and whoever wants to listen about.
Can I say something about it? Like, everything that Casey says is so true in terms of how special that bear was, because myself, like, I'm getting all of that energy from Brutus, even though I never interacted to Brutus. I saw Brutus a couple of times at the center, Casey. That would be great if you tell about the center, by the way, the Grizzly Center. But you could, everything that Casey's saying, basically, I'm saying it's true, because we've spent hours, months, years with Casey sitting down watching some wildlife from animals that we don't really understand, like whales, because you don't see much, to animals that we do understand better, like pumas, and we have some names for them, and we know, oh, this one is a little bit moody. There was one that we didn't like much. We called him Casey because it was kind of an A word.
He was rowdy. He was a rowdy. He's like me. But he's beautiful. Just no.
Well, we can debate about it, but the thing is that Casey's magic is to trespass that to an audience, and not only to an audience, to his friends, to his family, and that, yeah, that's a gift from Brutus to all of us, I guess. Like, there was a reason why there was a Brutus. There wouldn't probably been a Casey Anderson without a Brutus in terms of that story, and I can see that like every time you talk to Casey. Our conversations, actually, when we're driving for hours sometimes, or just sitting down waiting, it's about things like this. Like, yes, we talk about the normal stuff, sports, and like when we were heartbroken at some point in the past, things like that. But maybe 50% of our conversations is about wildlife stuff that maybe there's no answer. Like, not really book stuff. It's like thinking about things that we can't answer, dreaming, right? That's the fun part. In a bar, in Montana, sitting down, talking about this. It's true. We do that a lot.
Thank you, Casey, for sharing that touching experience of life and that shaped your perspective on wildlife conservation and education as well. Um, well, René, some of your recent highlighted productions are Our Great National Parks, available on Netflix and narrated by Barack Obama, and the documentary series of CNN Patagonia, Life on the Edge of the World. What can you tell us about the international scale of these kind of projects?
The first thing to say about it, I think I've never said it like this, but all the work that I've been doing before in Chile paid off here, because I had those stories, and I was very good friends of many of the researchers and the people and the locals in this place and in here. And then I had the chance of putting together a team. We had COVID in there hitting us all. And I was lucky enough to, unfortunately, I think Casey wasn't involved filming, but Casey's company, Vision Hawk, Montana, like all of his team was here. So they were part of those productions as well. And for me, like, when we use the international scale kind of thing, yes, it's everyone can watch that in different countries around the world, in Netflix or Discovery or CNN or whatever. But the international scale is when you are able to put together all the people that you care, you love, put them together, go and make films or a series, and for the big guys, like for the big companies. So I actually think that Casey wasn't here because you had like tiny little babies, newborn, right? But yeah, it's I think this is when everything that we did before gets together and works out. So we had the chance of building this series, working on them since the very beginning, putting the stories and telling them to the rest of the world. Barack Obama or Pedro Pascal from Patagonia, the other series, they are nomination to Emmys and cinematography and nomination for the narrator. But at the end of the day, it's just really good stories from Chile and Argentina, with the CNN series, and their stories are worth showing to the rest of the world, especially the one from Life on the Edge of the World, because that's the relation of humans with animals. The story of Our Great National Parks. Yes, it's Barack Obama, and yes, it's about the stories of protected areas and how animals thrive in there with the help of people as well, like National Park Services and the Tompkins. But the Patagonia Life on the Edge, I think, is very special because we were able to put together those friends, and they are on screen talking about their work, talking about their life achievements, because some of these people, they don't get the life achievement recognition and they give them awards, and they're having life achievement results. Like some of them are saving species from the brink of extinction. Some of them are doing it and they don't have that recognition. So this is the best recognition for them. Like, we're going to film a story. Doesn't matter if it's a 3-5 minute little part of that film or that series, but you're going to be there and the world will know about it. Including Carla Christie, who was in this podcast before. We went with her to film the Chilean dolphin. That's a great example, because the Chilean dolphin, Casey is lucky enough, he saw Chilean dolphins when we were sailing, but it's an animal that it's very unknown, not only for scientists like Carla. She's dedicated her life to it, but it's also known for, and mainly known for, the Chileans. We don't know that we have an endemic species that is called Chilean dolphin, and it's a small dolphin, lives in kind of darker waters, and it is not like the acrobatic dolphin jumping out of the water. It's not easy to film. And we spent some time with Carla filming those dolphins to show them to the world. And she's talking about her work. So, I think that's the best of that series for me, that many, many people got their screen that they deserved to show what they're doing.
Great.
Perfect. René, thank you very much for that shout out to a previous episode of American Spaces on Air. If you want to check out Carla Christie's episode of American Spaces on Air, you will find the link in the description. Very good. Perfect. Casey, now I have another question for you, and it's kind of related to what you were saying before about Brutus. So, what challenges do you face when translating complex wildlife behaviors and relationships into content that resonates with diverse audiences?
Wow, that's a tough question. I like it. There's lots of challenges. I think, I mean, we touched on it a little bit. One of the last questions. I think, we're always trying to think outside the box. We're always trying to figure out a way to tell the stories like they've never been told before. It's a combination of two things. We're always looking for stories that have never been told before, and we're always looking for ways to tell those stories that have never been told before in a way that's never been told before. So in this day and age, there's so many ways to consume content. It's from the YouTube, the streamers, to you can still, there's still regular, subscription kind of television, ad supported television out there. And then there's everything else. I mean, from games to everything else, and to podcasts, right? There's a fair amount of stories that I like to tell just on podcast format, because it gives you the time to talk about it. You can talk about it in an organic way. But so I think those are the challenges. It's like trying to keep up, trying to always stay cool. That's the one thing I always like to say. Like, for lack of a better way to put it, it sounds old school, but how can we keep wildlife cool? How can we keep these stories cool? And by cool is that we've got to keep up with the new generations, because they're the ones that are going to be making the decisions, and they're going to be making the choices, and they're the ones inheriting all the problems. Frankly, I think the new generation, I love it. They're defiant. They're full of energy. They got information at their fingertips, and they want to make a change. You look at a guy like me that's been doing it for 30 years. I don't know how much has changed in 30 years. I don't know if we've done our job, so now it's empowering the youth to get out there and do something. Right. And I think they are. I think they're going to, and I love it. So yeah, we're just looking for ways to empower them and give them information, get them excited. And there's so many ways to do it. We just got to keep up with it.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. And we're getting to the end of our podcast. So my last question for you two is, what are some of the most pressing wildlife conservation issues we face today, and how do you address them nowadays?
That's a good question. I mean, I think from the top, and we can go back and forth on this, Renee, but climate change is obviously something that, in the United States, there's a fair amount of people that don't even believe in it. So it's very difficult to talk about it. In fact, there's a lot of these platforms that we have the opportunity to make television shows for won't even let us talk about climate change. That's like a bad word. Don't do that. So we have to find ways to talk about it or show it without saying anything about it. But it's easy. It's so easy because there's so much terribleness going on around it. I mean, I was just thinking about this the other day, and I was talking about it on my podcast. I've been fortunate enough to go to many locations 10 years later. So, I'll go to a location and then I'll return. And I've seen such change from one trip to the next because of climate change. And it's undeniable. And I think that's what we got to do. We got to show the facts where they become undeniable to everybody.
I agree on a 300% with Casey, and I would add something else, that is how do we kind of face or build new projects. I think there's a concept also which is, it's more related to animals, basically, and it's coexistence. When we're talking about coexistence, when we're talking about species that before you would go and film an animal and show that animal on your film, and that was the animal doing whatever the animal was doing for a big production, but you don't know what's going on around, and probably it had a lot of pressure from humans, human encroachment, loss of habitat, and that animal was really threatened by something. Nowadays, I think coexistence, it's a concept that it's very, at least it's very accepted by commissioners, by TV stations, because we're not hiding the reality anymore. If you need to talk about it, just put it in there. Like, going with pumas again, the example of the fence, right, Casey? There's a fence there in Torres del Paine that separates a farm from Torres del Paine, from the national park. The animals don't know fences. They just go through. They just cross the fence. And for many years, you were filming there, and it's, when you're talking to your people in charge from the TV stations, it's like, get the fence out. Don't show the fence. It's like, it doesn't have any kind of a, it's not a beautiful fence. I don't care about that fence, if it's beautiful or not. It's just the fence, and it's the reality of that animal. I mean, things are happening there. Why are you going to hide it? And that's something that I've noticed in the last probably 3-4 years. It's much more kind of honest, I think, from us, from the industry as filmmakers, thinking about coexistence. Like, you're living close to these animals. Those animals, they live here outside of your window, and you have to coexist with them. So I'm just adding another layer, because yes, 100% with Casey, with the climate change, which is big problem. But the way that we put those projects together is thinking about how can we show these stories to the world, really. Yeah. Actually, Jackson Wild this year is coexistence, the topic, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to paraphrase a few things that I've heard him steal some from some people that are smarter and more articulate than me. But, the most important habitat that's out there that needs to be protected, that we need to win, is the human heart. That is the most important. I just interviewed a guy recently who's a pretty famous National Geographic photographer, and he told me that he is now no longer documenting things to make a change. He's just documenting extinction. That's what he says. So that's the doom and gloom. I mean, he doesn't even think he can make a difference anymore. He's just documenting extinction. In fact, he made a photo of a dead giraffe with red sneakers on its feet. And the title of the photo was, "The world is coming to an end, but at least we can buy cool things." And I think that's an important message when it comes to what we're talking about here in this final question, is that we have to change the hearts and the minds of the people. That is the number one thing. Side of, coexistence will come with that. Climate change will come with that. But, as long as buying cool red sneakers is more important than saving pumas, then we're never going to win. So I think it's reprioritizing as a humanity, and realizing what is important, what is really valuable, and that this stupid iPhone really isn't, that it's not that important, that the trees outside are more important. And that if we can win that bit of habitat, that piece of property that we all call the human heart, then the rest of the things will change. But that's the most important thing that we need to change. And that's why we're all here, right? That's why we're all here on this podcast today, so we can tell our stories, so people can listen, and they can change their mind, but most importantly, change their heart, and get out there and do something.
Perfect. And now we would like to give you a little window to continue sharing stories about what projects do you have upcoming that you would like to share with us. So the stage is yours. Is there anything you would like to share? Casey, you mentioned that you had a podcast too. So
I've got a podcast, Wild Tracks, with Casey Anderson. You can find on all the usual podcast places, or even on YouTube. That's a cool little project going on. I'm going to be digging into writing a couple books, and I'm working on a tiger project. As René mentioned earlier, that he's got to see a tiger. There's some tiger project that'll be coming on Curiosity Stream in the next year. And I'm also working on another big tiger project that maybe I can get René to come along on potentially and make all his dreams come true. But he has to work for free and carry my backpack.
If I get chicken sandwiches, I'll do it.
Okay, deal.
Um, I don't know. This last couple of years have been so busy because sometimes we work very deeply in big series, big productions, but also we go sometimes and do a couple of shoots for a bigger series, but you're only in charge of directing a sequence. So there's a lot that should be coming out next year. In Netflix, there's a series coming called Our Oceans in Netflix. It will be probably next year. There's a couple of sequences that I directed in there. Some of them in the Arctic with walruses, polar bears. There's other stuff with jaguars also in other series. I usually post on my Instagram and let people know when these things are coming, because as we were mentioning before, like even when we are the director producers and it's our production of our companies, we don't know really when the films are coming out. They let us know. Even if it's our film, they tell us like, oh, next month, like the TV stations.
I've had worse. I've had like, did you see your film premiere last night? I'm like, what?
People think that we know. I don't know. Like the series of Patagonia that we were talking before, the CNN Patagonia series in the US was aired by CNN, but in all Latin America, it's Animal Planet and Discovery. And I've been literally watching TV. It's like, oh, it's a series now, and random times, random days. I don't know. Like we don't know. So yeah. So there's a lot of little things, but there's a couple of bigger projects that they actually are the my passion projects right now that we have to discuss with Casey next week because they're happening, and I can't talk much right now, but they are on a really good track. We're gonna talk next week, Casey Anderson.
All right, I'm in.
Well, guys, we would like to thank you very much for joining this podcast. It has been an extra long episode of American Spaces on Air, which has us extra happy. And it has been also very, very fun. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences and all of your knowledge with us. And the American Spaces are now your home as well. So we would like to continue collaborating and working with you in the future if possible. So once again, thank you very much for participating in this podcast. And until the next opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.